Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Leagues 4 video. I've seen so many of you, completing your tasks, getting further into, your kind of like your Leagues 4 progression. And along with that, I think one of the most interesting questions that a lot of people have been asking is like, what tier 7 and what tier 8 relic do I go for? These are kind of like your final combat relics. And honestly, the choices here are pretty tough. And so I can understand why a lot of people might be curious because it's really difficult to isolate them. They kind of work as sort of bundles. They also can kind of depend on your regions and stuff like that. So I just kind of wanted to make I guess, a longer video going over my thoughts on tier 7, tier 8, some recommendations, as well as some uses and some considerations that you might want to make before you make your selection. This might help. First off, let's just go through all the relics. I will do my best to explain them. Unfortunately, I only have Berserker and Undying Retribution, so I can't really showcase like what Weapon Master or what Soul Stealer looks like or Executioner Axe. But I'm sure that there's plenty of other content creators who have gone for that, and I'll see if I can try to, throw like a link or something so you can see them highlighting those as well. Okay, first up for Soul Stealer, this is like the Lifesteal, the Drain relic. All your attacks have increased minimum hit of 10%. This basically comes out to like a 10% damage increase, which is good. That's across the board 10% damage increase. Very nice. Now, whenever one of your attacks successfully hits, there's a 50% chance that you will restore your hit points and your prayer by 10% rounded up. 50%, 10% basically comes out to you get 5% hit points and prayer restored. This relic does not work for multi-target attacks or for special attacks, so you can't like Dragon Dagger and like get a ton of health back, and you can't also like barrage a whole mob of enemies and then like you're literally, it's like the blood barrage on steroids where you're just healing off all the damage done. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't work with multi-target attacks, doesn't work with special attacks. This is mainly just a nice smooth way of getting some lifesteal back from like single target DPS focused build. In addition, the restoration effect for like the Scythe of Vitter only works on the initial hit. In addition, for things like the Scythe of Vitter, it only works if you're like attacking one mob. So if you're doing any kind of like multi-hit, like with the Venator bow, only the initial hit is going to give it to you. You're not going to get like all the rebound damage from like the multi-hits. It's very much like a single target life steal prayer regen relic. And honestly, this one is very good. It's very strong. I really like how it just smooths out a lot of the damage intake you're taking. So any kind of fights where there's chip damage that will go through your prey, this just kind of solves it. And on top of that, you're also going to be getting your prayer back, which really does help you. Like, you basically don't have to worry about your resources nearly as much. This makes some of those longer fights, raids, fight caves, even Inferno, a lot smoother when you have, the ability to slowly regen. And in general, I think this one's a very solid choice. It's nothing super, super flashy. It doesn't like completely change your playstyle, but it does make, your general game plan a lot smoother, a lot like simpler PVM wise, where you're not like constantly having to deal with resources. And this can especially be very nice if you don't have Banker's Note. Banker's Note lets you basically take an infinite amount of food and prayer to wherever you want to go. This sort of bypasses that need for, as much food as you want, because if you're going to get all your life and your prayer back anyways every time you're hitting, they'll generally be topped off, assuming you're not like, like trying to solo the Calphite Queen. Like, you'll be topped off for most of the time. For the Weapon Master Relic, every 30 seconds, your special attack is restored by 30% rather than the usual 10%, so basically 3 times the regen. If you have the Light Bearer with the Desert, it's actually going to be every 15 seconds, so you're getting double that effect. It's very, very powerful with the Light Bearer, so that's already a huge effect. However, Weapon Master has a second effect, and really something that's more interesting in my opinion, and that's if you don't have any special attack, and the wording here is a little bit weird. It says if you have no special attack, but really it just means if you don't have enough special attack to cast a special attack, then you will just sacrifice 25 hit points to use the special attack instead. Special attacks are also 100% accurate against monsters, which really makes some special attacks, such as like a Dragon Dagger, insanely powerful. Now that you don't have to worry about accuracy, and you can just get all the bonus damage from it. I'm sure with like Dragon Claws and stuff like that, it's already very good. But you have to also realize that this loses some value against highly accurate special attacks, such as the Void Waker. Obviously, the Void Waker always hits anyways, so getting the 100% accuracy doesn't help that as much. It's better for things like a Dragon Dagger. And I do think that like with a Dragon Dagger, you can really get a lot of damage out. In addition, special hits have a minimum hit of 20% of your max hit. Again, this just basically comes out to a 20% damage bonus, so it's pretty good. And now, really, I think the big thing with this one is the fact that you can sacrifice your hit points to use the special attack, meaning that you can also like eat food or regen to get even more specs in. Or, like you can dump all your specs and then teleport to some kind of like altar, whether that's a player owned house rejuvenation portal. The statue of Narda also regens your special attack. So if you had like the desert, or if you had Fremenic and like I think Tyrannwyn to actually build your like an ornate rejuvenation pool. Although I think everybody can actually build the special attack regeneration pool, so that's at least nice. Then Weapon Master gets a lot better because basically your playstyle is going to be all about heading over to a boss, dumping your spec, getting like some special attack weapon, whether that's like a god sword, dragon claws, even a dragon dagger. Maybe you got like an armadillo crossbow or a Zerite crossbow. Using that and then heading back to an altar in between boss kills, last recalling back, and that essentially becomes your entire playstyle. It is a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. However, for me personally, I think that this it's very like, it gets kind of repetitive and boring after about like 100 uses or so. Once you've kind of dumped all your special attack, it just becomes a very like boring process of just dumping it. But you do get some really cool clips. I've seen people like killing Vorkath in like 8 seconds, so it is fun to use. I honestly think this was one of the most powerful relics. It's just a little bit too, like, it kind of takes over the entire game in a sense, where this just becomes all you kind of do. That being said, there are some interesting use cases with the sacrifice 25 hit points. Like I mentioned, if you have Banker's Note, you can really abuse this because you're going to have the option to like keep eating and eating and eating and just keep dumping spec more and more and more and more. However, you can also like combo this with any kind of special attack that regenerates your hit points. So things like the Saradomin Godsword, Zeros Godsword gives you 25 back. The blowpipe can be used as well, although I don't know if you'll go hit point. I don't think you'll go positive on that, but you'll still get some of your hit points back. Anything like that does work, and you can kind of get into like an infinite loop of just spamming spec, spamming spec, spamming spec. So that might be something you want to consider. That might honestly be enough of like a playstyle thing that you're just fine to do. And in general, here's kind of what I'm going to say is that tier 7 is all about playstyle, so it's hard for me to say which one is necessarily the best. It just comes down to what kind of playstyle do you want for your account for PVM. Do you want Soul Stealer for more of the chill, like brain off? You're fighting mobs like they're cows in Lumbridge. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to worry that much. All the mistakes are going to be smoothed out. Chip damage is smoothed out. You don't have to worry about prayer potions as much. Do you want to go with Weapon Master and just dumping specs? Basically getting into that kind of gameplay loop, or do you want to go with Berserker, which we'll talk about after? Finally, the only thing I want to talk about Weapon Master is with like the 100% accuracy. I think Weapon Master is very, very strong with ranged weapons because you're already going to be taking advantage of like Ruby Bolts or Diamond Bolts, mainly Ruby Bolts. Ruby Bolts deal like 20% of a monster's current hit points up to 100. So the ability to dump that out several times is really emerging as like one of the most competitive DPS options. I know a lot of people going with like Zaya, Ascarnia of the Desert, have been basically trying to get like an Armadillo crossbow or a Zerite crossbow and just spam specs. So if you're going range route, Weapon Master is quite solid. It is definitely something you should consider. So I definitely think Berserker is the most interesting, and it's also the one that changes the game in my opinion, the most interesting way. And that's because it has actually 2 effects. So the first and most obvious one is damage is increased against monsters by 0.4% per hit point you're missing. Essentially, for every 10 hit points you're missing, you're getting a 4% damage bonus. At 98 hit points missing, that would be just short of 40%, right? Like if we imagine you're missing 100 hit points would be 40%, so you'd be getting like 39.6%, something like that. And this does stack with something like the Darox effect, so basically anywhere where Darox is really good and viable, Berserker is also very good and viable. And in general, if you can camp 1 hit points, you're confident you're not going to take damage. Either you have some kind of like full protection with a prayer, or you're doing some kind of boss where you don't have to take damage if you're playing properly. A 40% damage boost is absolutely insane compared to the 10%, the 20% from the other one. Getting a 40% damage boost just across the board, that's a lot. That's a lot. In addition, I think a lot of people will probably tunnel on the 40% and think like, okay, well, I have to be at 1 hit points to get this. However, keep in mind that if you're at like half health, you're still getting a 20% hit point or a 20% damage bonus. That's a lot. That is a lot. And there's a lot of times where you can pretty comfortably sit at like 50 HP, maybe 40 HP, 30 HP, and you're still going to be out of kill range. I know that I did a lot of bosses where I was just sitting at like 30-ish. Their max hit maybe was like a 25. And I could really like squeeze out as much damage as possible. Although you may want to consider going just a little bit higher so you don't have to eat in the middle of combat. There's a lot of times where I would, just basically be at like 50 or 60. And then by the end of the fight, I'd maybe be at like 25 and something like that. So I'm still always out of kill range. The monster can never kill me, but I'm consistently getting 20 to 30% extra damage, which is a huge amount if you're going for like more of a DPS, just like, you're not doing anything special. Your whole playstyle is just doing damage, doing damage, doing damage. And I would say that if you're not planning on sitting at low hit points, this is kind of a wasted relic. However, it does have a second effect, which is also really strong and quite game changing. And that's that your damage is equal to your max hit on monsters with full hit points. So this means that whenever you start a fight, this is what I call like your opener, you are always dealing your max hit, and it has 100% accuracy as well. So that's very good. In addition, with mage and range, there is a delay to actually attacking the mobs before your bolt or your shadow actually, or like whatever your mage ability is, before it actually hits the monster. So you can often get two, and with like mage at least, I know I've been able to get 3 hits in my opener that are all the max hit. Pretty much at the start of every single fight, as long as I'm at range. If I'm at melee range, I'll only get 2. If I'm far away, I'll get 3. I'm going to show this off over at the mole real quick, but what I did want to very quickly talk about is how to actually bring your health down low. So typically you would want to have something like the locator orb, which you can get with, I believe Fremenic will give you the locator orb. That does damage to you. I think the wilderness might have the locator orb from the Mage Arena 2 minigame. With Kandrin and Asgarnia, this has kind of been my choice. You can eat the Dwarven Rock Cake, and that will bring your health down. However, there are a couple of like default like base options that everybody can use, such as Nightshade. I think this has been the more popular one. And basically, this is just with like, I think Belladonna seeds, and you can eat this, take some damage, and that will get your health down low. This one's a little bit harder because you're going to have to go plant a whole bunch, but if you just need it like once or twice just to get to low health for like the mole or something like that, then it's actually quite convenient. Otherwise, again, a option like Dwarven Rock Cake is kind of the best. All right, so I'm starting at a far range just so I can take advantage of it. And you can see I'm going to click the mole one time, and I'm getting basically 3 max hits off before anything happens. And I actually managed to get like a 4th hit off, but you can see I get 1, 2, and then the third one is, it would be a max hit, except I just killed them all. So in most fights, raid bosses, at the start of every single phase, you're basically getting 3 max hits like this. And this can just be insane to just start off fights and really just kill stuff a lot faster. With melee, for example, you're only going to be getting like 1 of these. I think with range, you can get 3 as well. But yeah, this is kind of a game changer because it's really, really powerful to get a guaranteed max hit. That is a lot of damage that you're getting. And it also has a couple other like interesting use cases, which we can get into right now. So for example, let's say I'm doing Slayer. It becomes really easy to do Slayer very efficiently. I'm actually just going to be one-clicking all of these Pyre Fiends, and I'm actually one-shotting them because I'm getting a guaranteed max hit on every single one of them. And it really changes the name of Slayer when you're max hitting every single mob you kill, basically. Even with like Kraken, I was able to do 3 hits to kill every single Kraken. But yeah, this has just been, Berserker has been an absolute game changer for Slayer. And I've seen people doing like obviously I'm doing it here with Mage, but with Melee, you could do this as well and just land your max hit every single time, because every single monster I'm getting my opener, getting a max hit every single time. I don't even really have to be at low health. I could kill these guys in just 1 hit. And I'm showcasing Berserker a little bit more just because I have access to it, so I can show you guys its uses, but I'm sure there's other stuff that you can do. In raids, Berserker is pretty damn insane for any kind of ad rooms. This is because you can actually use the effect to one-shot every mob. It has 100% accuracy. So, for example, the monkey puzzle, it kind of becomes a joke when you can actually just one-shot every single mob. And with my mage attack, I was pretty reliably able to one-shot everything. Although some of the shamans, I would require 2 hits. But again, that's not a problem because as you can see, if I go to range, I can get 2 hits in like this, and they're both going to count as max hits. So I'll just 2-shot everything. I can I can one-shot the explosive monkeys as well. Basically, this room just becomes kind of like a whack-a-mole scenario where you just click on every single mob and you kill them very fast. And this makes Monkey Room quite easy to do. You don't even have to switch the correct combat style because, again, you have 100% accuracy. So, you could do this with ranged. You could do this with melee easily as well. Obviously, you just want to be careful with the explosive ones. But yeah, with major range, you could do this just fine. I'm pretty sure, you'd have the exact same effect here. So for bosses, I'm starting with 3 max hits here. Pretty insane. You can get quite a lot of damage done. And in addition, this makes, again, certain add phases a lot easier. For these rocks, I'm actually able to get a guaranteed max hit. So I can actually just pull out my Fang and do it. You could also use like a Trident here as well. The reason why I just prefer doing it with a melee hit is because you're getting in my opinion, I found it was a little bit easier to click when I didn't have to move, or when I didn't have to wait for the bolt to actually hit the animation. I'll see if I can demonstrate that very quickly. Yeah, so it's a little awkward sometimes because if I'm even though I hit it, I still am kind of running into it because I have to wait for the actual boulder to die. That's why I've been switching to the Fang because another really nice thing is you do get the max hit even for your off styles. So anytime you're training your off style, you're still going to be able to actually benefit from that. I found myself actually using this when I was doing my defender grind, for example. It really helped speed up how fast I was killing Cyclops because I would just switch to my melee and I was getting a guaranteed max hit at the start of every single Cyclops, which was actually really, really cool. I really like that effect as well. It does help. And while I can't show off every single use case of Berserker for raids, this also is useful for the Akka ads when they summon, getting a guaranteed max hit, or 3 of them really, on every single one of the little shadows. That basically ensures that you never miss the DPS race, which is very nice, even if you're going in with pretty budget gear. I also am pretty sure that on Theater of Blood, you're going to have no problem doing Nilos when you get the guaranteed max hit all the time with a fast weapon. And finally, I know I've been talking a bit about Berserker. I just really want to highlight all of the kind of interesting things you can do with it. But in certain things like Inferno or Fight Caves, it really gets a lot of power. First off, you can basically kill off almost every single ad. But one of the nice things is that this guaranteed max hit also applies to any kind of barrage that you do as well. So for example, I can start off, you would start off with an ice barrage, but you can actually start off all of these with just a guaranteed max hit for your barrage. Now you might think this is the mage relic, but I did go ahead and ask people. They were able to do this as well, even with the melee relic. And this really helps you when you get, a guaranteed hit on all of the nibblers. And in general, it just makes killing ads so much faster. I was one-shotting rangers in the fight cave. Even here, you can see I can actually one-shot even the blobs over here. So this, it really helps speed up certain things. I can also, barrage the follow-ups as well, get the guaranteed hit there as well. So that's pretty convenient. It's hard for me to say which one's better because, Soul Stealer, you're getting all the life steal back, but I think getting the guaranteed hit just makes this very, very clean. One thing I did want to talk about is if you have any kind of splash damage. So I'm going to hit the Ranger here, right? And you can see I'm going to splash onto the Mage and do 3, which is not very good because now he's actually off of his... I can't do my opener anymore, so if I attack once... that time I killed, but I'm not going to be guaranteed a max hit there if they're below their max health, essentially. All right, so with tier 7 out of the way, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but in general, I think, Berserker, very good with major range. Soul Stealer, in my opinion, works very nicely if you're going for a melee build anyway, because you're naturally going to be pretty tanky, so getting a little bit of lifesteal just to kind of get you through any chip damage you're taking, any damage that you are getting hit by. This basically turns you into a very nice tank where you just don't have to worry about prayer or health, and you can pretty much stay healthy the whole time and just kind of click mobs, and that's how you're getting most of your damage from. And then Weapon Master, in my opinion, gets very good with special weapons that you're actually building around. So, for example, a mage build doesn't have a lot of very great special weapons, so I probably wouldn't go Weapon Master with a mage setup. But if you have a Zerai crossbow, or you have something if you want to go Dragon Dagger spec, something like that, Weapon Master can be good for that as well. It's hard to say. It really is a playstyle change here, so it's up to you whether or not that's something you want to do for most of your damage. Okay, so tier 8, we got Executioner, Undying Retribution, and Guardian. Let's start with Executioner. So with this relic, you get the Sage's Axe. This item can be used to execute targets below 20% hit points. The Sage's Axe has an attack range of 6 tiles, and it will respect any range damage reduction a target already possesses. So basically, this means that if a mob is immune to range damage, you're not going to be able to execute it because it does count as range damage. I think this is the most important one here is Akka, the very last phase. They're at 20%. However, they're immune to everything but melee damage, so you're not going to be able to do it there. But in a lot of other cases, this does work. Also, I was mistaken. I thought that this would just automatically execute from your inventory, but it is an item. It is like an actual weapon that you have to equip, and then it will execute if they're below 20%. And this item, in my opinion, it is one of the most broken relics ever. It is an insane amount of damage to execute things below 20%. So if you're doing any kind of raid, Ohm, it's insane because you get to use it quite a bit to get executes on the hands, as well as the enrage phase at the very end. You get to use this all the time in Tombs of Amasket to do just an insane amount of damage, as well as skipping some of the hardest phases, such as in Wardens. You can just skip that entire lightning phase, which for most people I would say is the hardest part of Tombs of Amasket is that very last part of Wardens. You can also use this for in like Theater of Blood. First off, I mean 20% on every raid boss is already insane, but skipping the very last part of Verzik, the very final boss when she has like the tornadoes and stuff like that, I mean it's pretty ridiculous. And this really starts to see a ton more value if you start introducing group play. I don't think people really understand how insane this is. Let's say that we had a group of like 4 people, right? So typically a boss has like 100% of its hit points. Let's say it's scaled for 4 people. Theater's a little weird here, but let's just say we got 4 people, right? Now you're doing essentially 400% of the boss's health as a collective of 4. However, that 20% is still static. So that 20% really is 80% of 400%, meaning that if you by yourself have Executioner's Axe, right, and you are hitting something and dealing 20% in a party of 4, you've essentially done 80% of like you've done like 4 times what 20% is really, because you've done 4 people's worth of 20%. That alone is almost enough to like get you, like, you've almost completely contributed with just that alone. You've done an insane amount of damage just with that, and you'll be getting MVPs like crazy with this thing. You really are going to be like the highest damage in any time you're doing a group, and that's why I think this is such a broken, insane relic if you plan on doing raids with other people, because you will be sniping MVPs. It is just insane. It really is. The only thing that I think a lot of people think about is like, okay, well, what if more than one person goes for it? Isn't it wasted value then? Isn't that why this sucks? And that is true. If you have more than one person, it is lost value. However, you lose so much value by not having anybody in your party with it that, like, I would say that like 9 out of 10 times, I would rather have, or really 10 out of 10 times, I would rather have 2 people in my party with Executioner Axe than to have 0, because with 0, I am losing a substantial amount of party DPS. And if you've played any kind of like MMO, you know how important it is to have like raid buffs. To me, this is like the equivalent of like a raid buff, and it's just insanely broken. So, yeah, I think if you're not doing raids though, this goes down in value quite a bit. I know I talked about the ability to skip Inferno. However, I don't think it's possible. Just you can't skip healers for Inferno, because I think they just heal them too fast for it to actually work. But yeah, if you're doing any kind of raid, this is really, really good. Like, it's very, very good. If you have friends, I would definitely recommend just try to get one person on Executioner Axe, because it is going to speed up kills substantially. I do want to say though that this is not like a plug and play relic, in the sense that like you do have to use it. You can't just like pick it and forget it. You are going to have to use it constantly, and it's going to take a little bit of time for you to actually like get adjusted, and reminding yourself at like 20% hit points, equip the axe, get the one shot. You also get a lot of range experience, from what I understand. I think it's actually a really nice way of basically getting all your range experience. So yeah, it's kind of convenient there. Okay, Guardian. So this is the you're basically like a super thrall that you get to summon and it lasts 30 minutes. So basically you get the Guardian Horn, and you just have to remember to click it every 30 minutes for extra damage. As far as its damage, it starts with a min hit of 6, max hit of 15. And I think people, like, with really, really high accuracy, but I think people have basically calculated out to be about 3 DPS. To put that into perspective, most DPS builds in leagues are doing about 30 plus DPS. So you're looking at somewhere about 10% of your like full build setup. And this gets a lot better if you're fighting any boss that you can't use your primary style, so you're forced to use your off style. Then the Guardian really can carry you, because your damage relatively is going to be substantially lower when you're using like pretty trash gear, kind of like whatever budget setup. You don't get the tick speed up and whatnot. So yeah, that's That's where I think Guardian really shines. It also is probably the most like plug and play relic where you pick it up and you just click the Guardian horn every 30 minutes basically. That's all you do. Personally, I think that makes it kind of boring. I feel like whereas Soul Stealer is a interest, or at least it's fun for me because it kind of makes things very chill. The Guardian just kind of adds DPS. It doesn't actually really do anything, or there's not really any interesting interactions with having, a super thrall with you. It's just click a button to get like 3 extra DPS. And that's personally, I just find that kind of boring. Although, some people really like it. And I think that, if you don't have a specific purpose in mind for the other tier 8 relics, maybe you don't have raids, maybe you don't plan on using the Undying Retribution very much, and we'll talk about that in just a bit, then yeah, Guardian it's a very agnostic choice in that it doesn't need a lot of setup. It doesn't need a lot of synergy. It just kind of works. It works everywhere. There's no downside. There's nothing you have to sacrifice to make it work. It's very, very simple to use, very easy to use. Kind of works in whatever build you want. It's just not the most interesting for me personally. Okay, and finally, Undying Retribution. You can probably tell I went with this one, and I think it's very interesting for a couple of reasons. Also, I'll be calling this like cheat death for the most part, just because that's what I've been calling it cheat death. So if you hear me say that, just assume this is the relic, right? Now, Undying Retribution or cheat death has 2 parts to it. First off, when you take fatal damage from an NPC or player, you will restore all of your hit points and prayer. That is a lot. Okay, that is very good. I did not realize how much I would utilize this when I was getting low on prayer, and instead of actually using prayer pots, I would just use Undying Retribution to get back to full. It was very nice, very, very simple to use, and this only has a 3-minute cooldown. So for a lot of bosses, this means you can use it pretty regularly. Like you can't use it every single kill. You're not just gonna be able to like suicide bomb every single kill, but like for a lot of bosses, once I started grinding them, I didn't have to use very much prayer or food at all. By the time I was at low health, if I was actually doing the mechanics right, I could just go ahead and proc Undying Retribution again, get the cheat death effect, and I'm back to full one more time. That's insane. However, there's a second effect in this, in that it also does like recoil damage, or it does like a splash or explosion damage when you die. So when you trigger the effect, you deal damage to all monsters within 2 tiles of you, and it's in an AoE. It does do AoE damage. I was able to use this for like Slayer monsters when I would go like do Smoke Devils and like a burst or barrage task. It does do AoE damage. In PvM combat, this damage will be equal to 200% of your prayer level. So make sure you're working on your prayer. Mine does about 160 right now, so yeah, get your prayer up. It does help. Although really, the difference between like 200 and 170 is not like, it's not going to be the end of the world. You don't need 99 prayer for this. Just getting any kind of damage with this is quite strong. And there are a couple of NPCs that are recoil immune. However, it seems like Nex, Hespori, Vorkath, and the Wildy bosses have all been like tagged so that it will work on them. Now, you may personally not think that Undying Retribution is working as intended, and that's just because it's a little bit janky. You have to use it properly. First off, and most importantly, is you have to be close enough to the monster to actually go ahead and get the damage done. However, the other most important thing is you have to be hitting it on the kind of like its like weak spot, if that makes sense. All right, so we're going to run back to the Inferno just to kind of demo this out a bit. But basically, when I say the weak spot, this is the brain of mobs, and that's actually the southwest tile. So it might be a little bit tricky to see here, but I actually have its southwest tile here marked as ranged, or I have it marked as red here. And you guys can see, I can kind of move it to kind of see if I can show it, but its southwest tile is over here. And if I die anywhere else, it's not going to work. So like, let's say I die over here, my 2 tiles are not going to go ahead and hit it. So you might be thinking like, okay, well, that's why it's not working. But if you are consistently able to get to its southwest tile, like right here, I can even stand here because it's 2 tiles away, and I'm actually going to get the damage to work on him, right? So this is what I mean by if you're going to be using this, go ahead and make sure you're hitting in the southwest tile, and you should always try to think about that. You can use I have a plugin called Better NPC Highlight that you can tag certain things. But if you just get comfortable and start thinking about like, where's the southwest tile, it becomes a lot easier to actually go ahead and track that. And I've been able to make this work on just about every single boss I've come across. There's very few of them where it seems like it doesn't work. Even in the Akka room, it does work now. In the very last phase of Akka, I was actually able to make that work. I think the cooldown is reset, so I can show it one more time and like fail it this time. I'm not sure if this will work or not, but let's go ahead and test. Yeah, there we go. So this time it didn't work because we're not able to actually hit like his critical point or his brain. So yeah, we don't get it that time. Good to know that deaths actually do reset the cooldown. Now, as for actually tracking the cooldown, that's probably the one thing that is a bit annoying to do. There's not really a good way of doing it. In the chat, you'll be able to get a message where your relic has lost power for 3 minutes, but there's no cooldown on Undying Retribution like there was for last recall. So unfortunately, you kind of have to just wait to get it back up. You'll get a message after 3 minutes that says like your Undying Retribution has come back. Okay, so with the wrap up of all the relics, you might be more confused than you started with, but I'll just give you a little bit more ideas. Mainly, I just wanted to kind of explain just practical uses for all of these, as well as like what you can do. So I'll basically go ahead and just explain some of the synergies. Again, it's all playstyle, and I think the tier 7 ones in particular are the most impactful, and tier 8 is kind of like a complementary, depending on what you actually want to do with it. Personally, I think that Berserker with Mage or even Range is very, very strong. But if you're going Mage, I just feel like Berserker has got to be the strongest because you're getting 3 max hits on top of, the opportunity to deal damage. Just you're getting a huge amount of DPS increase. There's not a lot of good special attacks, so Weapon Master kind of falls out of favor. And, Soul Stealer is not bad, but I think that the damage you get from Berserker is just kind of insane. Getting guaranteed barrages, even when you're not mage, is also very insane. And Undying Retribution pairs very well with Berserker. One thing I didn't really talk about Undying Retribution that is sort of really hard to even quantify is the fact that you can actually use it to sort of like save your life. A lot of times you can just use it as a cheat death. You don't have to be using it to actually get the damage in all the time. And I've just found this to be such a lifesaver and such a nice feature to have in raids, or if I'm fighting a boss. Just like if I'm 30 minutes into Tombs of a Masket and I accidentally mess up Simon Says in the Akka room, or I accidentally run into an orb and die, it's just nice to have like one cheat death that you can have available. When I was doing the Inferno, it was nice, like, oh, I made one little mistake. I messed up a prayer or something like that, or I accidentally ran out and tanked a hit. Okay, we get a cheat death in. You screw up Jad one time. It's just nice to have that available to you when you're doing some of these longer encounters where you're not going to be wasting like 30 minutes or sometimes an hour of your time just by having Undying Retribution available. It's very convenient. It's also made the game quite fun for me. But again, it pairs really nice with Berserker, mainly because you can kind of afford to sit at very low health. For example, in the Warden's fight, I've been doing that fight at like 1 health. I'm not even joking, because in a lot of ways you can actually do a lot of fights at very, very low health. Maybe not 1, maybe you could be at like 10 or something like that, depending on the fight that you're doing. I know with like Leviathan, he does a little bit of chip damage, so I usually do Leviathan at like 10 to 15 or something like that. And if I do make a mistake, okay, then I just play safe for 3 minutes basically. And that's made raids a lot more fun for me when I can actually afford to sit at very, very low health. And then if I do make a mistake, well, let's just play safe for 3 minutes. Let's trust my game skills, I guess. Let's trust my mechanics to not die without and I'll just play safe for like 3 minutes basically. So yeah, Berserker and Undying Retribution pair very nicely together. I think Weapon Master and Executioner are quite good together, especially if you're going for the range relic, because you're going to be using a lot of Ruby crossbow bolts. Ruby crossbow bolts do percentage of the current, not percentage of the max, meaning that you're going to be dumping a lot of specs, doing a lot of percentage damage, and then when they hit about like 30% or something like that, you're not really getting that much value out of doing percent damage anymore. And by then you should be able to just throw on your Executioner axe and just kind of finish that point off. So you're getting a sweet spot when they're at full health, and you're getting a sweet spot when they're at execution phase. But in general, Executioner is just broken with like any of these if you're planning on doing groups. I would really say, like, if you got a couple friends and you're planning on doing raids together, try to have one person go Executioner. You will be the MVP every single raid. I'm not even joking. Executioner is insane in groups. It really, really is. I could also see a bit of synergy with Weapon Master and Undying Retribution. Basically, you're going to dump all your spec, get your hit points down really, really low, and then proc the cheat death, get all your hit points back up, and you can resume casting more and more special attacks. So if you have like more of a consistent special attack setup that's not relying on like Ruby Bolts, maybe you have like a melee setup where you're doing like a Dragon Dagger, Dragon Claw, something like that. then I can see Weapon Master pairing with Undying Retribution pretty nicely. And finally, for Soul Stealer, I've already talked a little bit how I think like melee probably benefits the most off this, just because Mage and Range have more to benefit off of Weapon Master and Berserker. But I would personally say that with melee and Soul Stealer, I think you have a very nice and like linear path with Guardian. Obviously, you could still go Executioner with Soul Stealer because, you know, if you're doing any kind of group combat, and in general, Soul Stealer with Executioner is totally fine. However, Soul Stealer with Undying Retribution has a bit of like weird synergy in the sense that you're generally going to be topped off if you're running Soul Stealer. That's kind of the goal, is you always want to stay topped off. So if you wanted to actually get Undying Retribution to go off, well, first off, you don't need the hit points and the prayer restore, which is, to me, is one of the best parts of Undying Retribution, is getting, you know, full health, full prayer back up. You don't really need that anymore. And then on top of that, like, you'd have to like intentionally go out of your way to like kill yourself for the most part. But hey, if you're new to PVM and you just want to have the cheat death anyways, just as like a backup in case, you know, you die to a one-shot mechanic, because let's be real, a lot of deaths in old school RuneScape, it tends to be, you know, one big mistake where you just die very, very fast, as opposed to like a series of small mistakes. You can still go with cheat death. It's just that, again, if you're going Soul Stealer to like learn PVM and smooth out your mistakes, I don't think you really want Undying Retribution, and I think you're actually I think you're hurting yourself learning PVM properly with both of these, because you're just basically like, you just take like no, yeah, it's like you just don't take damage. You don't have to really respect any mechanics. And again, I would just go with Soul Stealer and Guardian, just because they're probably like the most agnostic choices. You don't really need to build around them or set up a build around them. You just kind of, you know, turn your brain off, and all PVM becomes very, very chill. You're just getting free damage with the Guardian without having to think about it or worry about it or swap your gear around or pay attention to your cooldown. You're just going to press the Guardian every 30 minutes. On top of that, you're getting a lot of life regen and a lot of prayer regen. So yeah, those would be kind of my choices: Berserker and Undying Retribution, Weapon Master with Executioner, Soul Stealer with Guardian. But really, guys, tier 7 and tier 8, as you can see from the length of this video, there is so much to talk about. There's so many options at your disposal that it's really going to come down to, you know, what you want. What kind of play style do you want to play leagues with? Do you want just a raw DPS build? Do you want to be spamming specs? You know, that's all viable. It's up to you to do what you want. Do you want the comfiness of Soul Stealer? It's your choice, right? I can't, like, if you don't want to play, if you don't want to be playing at 1 health, don't go Berserker. You know what I mean? If you don't want to be spamming specs, don't go Weapon Master. But if you do want to spam specs, then like obviously Weapon Master is going to be the best. If you plan on playing in groups, Executioner is amazing. You know, if you want to have fun cheating death and you think, you know, you're going to die a couple times and you want to have that emergency, Undying Retribution is just amazing. And, you know, if you just want to have a little bit of raw DPS without having to think about it, Guardian is, I mean, it's never going to fail you. You know what I mean? It's never going to let you down. It's always going to be there for you. And that's what makes it like a really powerful relic in its own right. So good luck choosing. Hopefully this, at the very least, I hope this gave you some more information. Although, you know, I think reviewing this video, I think I've only made the choice a little bit more difficult. But hopefully, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I will try to get to you. Again, I only have, you know, kind of limited knowledge playing with the relics that I have, but you know, I've done my best to try to like research how the others work and stuff like that, and try to see what interactions are available and, you know, things that might not be working properly. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.